You're listening to Biz-Souls, the business podcast with an edge, hosted by me, Rona Lewis, and Jeffrey Hansler. Tune in for perspectives and discoveries about the changing world of business. It's time to connect to the heart, soul, and humor of how business gets done. Heidi-ho, kids. It's us, Jeffrey and Rona. Welcome to Biz-Souls. I'm Rona Lewis, and...
We're back in Disneyland. Hi-ho, hi-ho, hi-ho. And
that's Jeffrey Hansler. He's the other one. He's the tall one.
Yeah. And we get to the heart and soul of business and the people that make it happen. And
I totally throw you off with that.
You always throw me off with that stuff.
That's the whole point. Improv.
We had a great guest yesterday.
We did. We had Dr. Michael Krupane come talk about his Power 5 cookbook, which I have been playing with and having a great time, thanks to Melissa's Produce and all their wonderful produce that they provide to cook. And I've been hoarding it. I don't think you've tasted anything.
No. And he's been on the book tour, and so he just had a break, and so he did a quick podcast for us, and he's back on the road promoting the book. And as he said, it's a labor of love because by the time you get through promoting it, nothing.
Yeah, I know that. Anyway, today we are talking about changing
environment.
Of organizations.
Of organizations.
And how did you started thinking about it watching a bee? What was that?
Yeah, okay, so we're out drinking coffee in the morning. I know it's not spring yet, and it's...
I had like a blanket over my head.
It is California, except there was a bee there, and then the bee was for the flowers. And so, the vision came to me. Bees are kind of like... consultants, external consultants, and they go from flowers, and it's a symbiotic relationship. Without the bees, the flowers couldn't live because we're all worried about the bees. They've been dying,
so they pollinate the different organizations.
Correct, and right now we're going through a dramatic change. So with the Industrial Revolution, we went through a fairly dramatic change. And who was it? Weber. Let me see. I wrote down some notes.
He's got notes. Yes.
I wrote down notes so that I would be a little more prepared on this, although no.
Weber, to look them up so
exactly.
So prepared.
Max Weber and Frederick Taylor. So when the Industrial Revolution was around, they talked about organizations needing to change, that you wouldn't have one person running it. You would have a board, and you would have this board could handle the complex problems of organizations that came up with the Industrial Revolution. And then you had specialists underneath it, so it was a guiding body. We're going through another revolution now with AI and with technology. And in this revolution, what I've noticed and what I haven't seen is I haven't seen boards doing another shift or the leaders, CEOs do another shift.
Yeah. Well, we have both worked on the leadership side and with the employees, up and down. And you have experience with boards that I don't have because I just, I can't imagine boards because they tend to be a little older and like old school, and they like things a certain way. How open, and I may be wrong, so you can talk to that. How open they would be to, play and creative thinking and innovation, because they like things as they are. At least that's their reputation. So maybe you can talk to that.
Well, and I just made a statement. And so tying directly into yours, I've just made a statement that we're not seeing a lot of board shift. I am seeing the smarter board shift. So I'm beginning to get inquiry calls from CEOs about the function of the board and their role and how they can make their organization stronger. And it started last year, I guess, where people were talking about it, and it's just increasing. So I think intuitively the best CEOs and the best boards know they need to change. Now,
right, I agree with that.
Now, the reason I ended up working with boards, because we both came from from the streets on things. I came up through business development, though.
And
sales. And because that's such a primary component of organizations, be they for-profit or non-profit, they have to generate funds either through fundraising or fees.
Otherwise,
or sales.
they go out of business no matter what they are.
And so because of that, I got included. I started getting invited in because of the success we had of generating, new sales, generating new businesses, generating new focus. They invited me into the board and the executive. So I got to work with them, and I think that's the only reason. And I think now boards are much more open, especially with the call for diversity within boards, and people are doing it. Except they still haven't changed the map. And that's the issue. That's the issue. They haven't
What
changed.
do you mean by map?
So boards are, they handle three. So a board for an organization. So you've got the executives and you've got your board. And a lot of times boards see themselves as just fiduciary. They're there to make sure that the CEOs don't make mistakes. They're there. And what happens is they get caught in these patterns and they really just become a stamp for the CEO. So Elizabeth Holmes, the board completely fell down on their job. She was just kind of the dynamic leader, and they were all kind of following along, and they were trusting her, and they were just focused on the standard stuff, the rote stuff. It's boring, and they tuned out.
Right.
And that's one of the problems. So then this, another thing boards have dabbled in is strategy. Only they're usually just approve the strategy, or they just, stamp it, it's okay, or they ask some questions about it. And they're not as actively involved in it. And so now, because of social media and because of the change of organizations, boards need to work differently with the CEOs. And this makes CEOs nervous, and it makes boards nervous because nobody really knows how to do this. And sorry.
Go ahead. No. Finish your thought, because I have a thought. Every so often I have one. So go ahead. Throw yours.
Well, one of the biggest changes, so this change when boards and leadership started really looking at strategy, was through Michael Porter's work. And I've been talking about Michael Porter forever. And he's a genius in terms of what affects organizations. And especially for nonprofits, boards have a tendency to look just internally, and they're not looking at the big picture. So now we're at this point where it has to be, you have to start thinking differently. And this is why I believe you're hearing more about creativity and getting more asked about creativity at a higher level.
Yeah.
Because this, generating new ideas and working differently, it's going to require that creative and then innovative thinking, that transition. You've got to have the creative thinking, then you've got to have the innovative thinking.
Well, and you have to have, it's always a trickle down. The CEO, the whole C-level has to be open enough to allow for those ideas that are not theirs. And this isn't the way things are done. And, I believe the smartest leaders have smarter people around them. That's
Correct.
what, I was a great manager, and I think a good VP, because I knew who I had, and I was incredibly vulnerable and transparent. And I think the C-level suite has to be all those things. And from what you're saying, the board has to be like that also. I think they get a totally different view, and they have to be more open to seeing the whole organization and what else can be done.
Exactly. So, interrupt me as I go through this. I want to go through...
Gladly.
Yeah, really. I want to go through a story. So I belong to an organization. The organization was one of the early organizations formed. It's in the let's call it a sport activity that you require a certification. So we'll keep it vague because this is not a positive story. Anyway, this group was one of the first ones out, and people on it had different ideas, and those people left. Well, they grew other organizations, and one of these organizations sold, I guess it's close to nearing 10 years now, sold for like $900 million.
Wow.
Or $700 million. Whereas
a lot of money.
The organization they came from hasn't grown at all. As a matter of fact, it shrunk, and now it's almost insignificant in the industry, which is a shame. So anyway, I got elected to the board because the problem was the board and the culture of this thing.
Well, I think, culture is a huge factor. Finish your story. Go ahead.
Anyway, so first of all, the board was...
We only have 30 minutes.
Yeah, I know. Well, I'll cut it short. So first of all, the board was only fiduciary, and it was rubber stamping. And they had a couple of strong personalities in it. And the strong personalities had a different idea, except they were keeping secrets on the board. So there's no transparency going on. And this is a culture within the organization. They don't share with the membership of what's going on.
Well, no wonder they're losing everyone.
So, I was trying to bring in ideas for the board growing, and one of the things we focus on is succession. How do you make a stronger board? How do you improve it? And they immediately quashed those ideas. And because I was bringing them up, they went into John Cotter's 4 ways to kill an organization. So first there's delay, and there were so many cases of delaying ideas, and I had to use, I got them to do an innovation award, and the amount of work to get that through. And since then, and the idea is if they're rewarding innovation, maybe they'll become a little more innovative. Anyway. It was just a nightmare.
Evidently not.
It was a comedy routine. I won't even go into the comedy routine.
It sounds like they were just so set in their ways, and that fear and control thing came up.
Right. In terms of transparency and communication, they brought up confusion. They brought up fear mongering, and then finally, to shut me up, they went after me with all these charges and things that were just made up. Now, I've only got so much time to waste on an organization that isn't going to learn.
Yeah.
So anyway, by the time I got off the board, finished my term, got off the board. The guys did get rid of almost all the people in the organization. The trouble is they brought in a new CEO, and I called the new CEO and I said, "Here's what I've learned. Here's what this." And the new CEO is like, "I know exactly what's going on. I know how to handle this organization. I've done organizational development." And it's been 2 years and he hasn't done a thing. And now the people that were trying to take over the organization before, they're sneaking back in there by doing some of the business development things. And they're beginning to get this guy's ear again. And they're just not going to give up because these guys have their own agenda for themselves.
That's exactly what I was saying. Yeah. They just have their own thing going. They know what they want, and to hell with everybody else, which is not a reason to be on a board.
So this is where the bee thing and the flower thing comes in. One of the things that you could do, and I offered for the CEO, I said, "Look, I can come in and help you. I'm part of the organization. I care about the organization. I can help you on this." And it's not about the money. It's just about helping the organization and making an investment, giving back to the organization. And he wants nothing to do with it. He knows it. He's hero leadership. He's got to know it all.
Right.
Meanwhile, the board hasn't been working on themselves. They haven't been improving. And I specifically asked him what he was going to do to develop the board. And he said he was going to, and none of that's happened because he doesn't want it to happen, because if the board develops, they're going to ask different questions of him. Yeah. So this is why that B coming in, that B is the outside consultant coming in. And getting them to pollinate, you look at pollination as talking. Getting them to have different conversations, get them to ask different questions, put them, gently walk them out of their comfort zone to do this and guide this.
Which helps if you're fuzzy and striped as well.
It does.
Just like these.
It absolutely does.
Of course it does.
And the idea is, and one of the exercises to bring them through is that creativity session, the innovation session, and getting them to play. Because right now, this organization, just as an example, this one organization, they are so uptight. They've got their knickers so balled up. I don't see how they can breathe, let alone talk in anything that's not falsetto.
And that's the importance of bringing a consultant, is because most people who are in the organization, if they're trying to help a board, have no idea how to do it, and they'll just piss people off. Well, it's like, what are you doing? We're not playing stupid games or whatever. Well, they're not doing it right. You got to ease into it and know what to do.
And one of the difficulties for the groups that are doing this is if you come in, if you're hired by the executive, then you're with the executive. A lot of time, what boards may do is they're bringing in consultants for the board, except then you have a loyalty issue. It's really tough to find somebody that can transition and be the go-between and be the trusted advisor.
That's what I was going to say. Who has
leadership
to be,
and the board.
They have to get someone who is objective, who is like, this is, if you're going to pay me, pay me. If, I'm going to tell you the truth. I'm not going to kowtow you just because you're giving me money.
Right.
And that's a tough thing.
And one of the things, so this is a little pat on the back for me.
Hold on.
Here, you want to pat me on the back?
There you go.
So, the communication process I developed that I've been teaching for sales teams. Well, it's
for 100 years.
Yeah, it's not just a sales process. It's not just a persuasion process. This thing is a communication process. And all it does is it gives that fiduciary element to communication, where it allows you to dot the I's and cross the T's on things as you think through a creative process, a fiduciary process, a generative process of looking at new things and new ideas. And, it came from a bunch of things. It is one of the things that I've realized and seen the pattern in organizations that are very, very successful. So anyway, there are solutions out there.
They just have to, they have to be open enough to, number one, realize that things have to change. Otherwise, they'll be the blockbuster of their organization, of the industry. And they have to be they have to be self-aware enough that they realize that they don't know everything.
Right.
And that sometimes another viewpoint is what's needed to help bring about positive change.
It's funny you mentioned Blockbuster, because in 1995 I spoke to the Video Software Dealers Association, and they invited me in for customer service. And I was, as I was talking about it, somebody in the audience yelled about, well, you're not going to talk to us about return fees or late fees? And I said, well, since you brought it up, because I was directed not to talk about that. Blockbuster was the one sponsoring me at this event. And we started talking about it. And they were so set because they were looking at the fiduciary that the fees, the late fees, were keeping these mom and pop dealers alive in many cases. And those fees were upsetting people. And Blockbuster, that was one of their highest revenue areas, was the late fees rather than the videos. And they couldn't get themselves out of it. And this is the problem with myopic boards and leadership, is they just see their industry and not the threat of competition, which is what
picture.
They completely miss Michael Portner's. You are generating, and Blockbuster literally generated Netflix.
That's right.
And so
and put themselves out of business.
Yeah, they really did. And this is what I'm seeing going on in organizations. So I think, Rona, and to all the other consultants out there, our role is very important going forward for helping organizations, because this is a massive change due to AI, social media, and the changing infrastructure and the open communication links that are going on. And I can't even think of what Bitcoin and what digital money is going to do, because it's going to change the relationships within organizations. So
well, and I think that the one of the benefits of consultants is that it can alleviate, or they can help alleviate some of the fear if the consultant can go in without fear themselves, because consultants can. I've seen that, especially inexperienced consultants who are so afraid to piss off the people that they're working with by giving them an answer that they don't want to hear, that they're of no help at all. And it's just a vicious cycle.
Yeah, I ran across a consultant like that who you could just, he whatever they said, it was like, he'd say black when they wanted to hear black, and he'd say white when they wanted to hear white, and red when they wanted to hear red. And he just had no backbone whatsoever. Yeah. He just wanted that paycheck.
Right. And that's a shame. And I think any organizational person in charge of hiring consultants needs to really pay attention to that, especially just in their communication with that consultant.
Well, and I'm going to tell you, Rona, and you already know this, that the key to consultants being more effective that way is they need to learn how to play themselves, and they need to learn to lighten up on things. You need a close relationship. And this relationship isn't just it's a personal relationship at a high level, kind of like in Oppenheimer, his relationship with Einstein, his ability to just talk to him and share their fears and share their thoughts about what was going on.
Yeah. I'm doing some consulting with an organization that's in the game industry, online games, in-person games, and so I'm working with the co-founders, and they use me as a sounding board, and I have no hesitation to disagree with them, and this is why, so they're happy about it because I give them things that they haven't thought of or they don't have experience with, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not, and I told them when they first hired me, I am not a yes person.
Right.
I will never years ago when I worked with the founders, and I can say this because it's been 100 years, the founders of Juicy Couture Clothing Company, they would tell me stories and I'm like, really? No, just no, and that's what it may not be what organizations want.
Right.
It's what they need.
Well, and obviously, because I you've shared with me some of the conversations. They obviously trust you. And one of the things that I really enjoy is you're bringing in those elements, those skill sets, and you're binding them into the programs you're developing for them. So that the consultants or the trainers, facilitators that have these will also have an eye. They've got a flavor of the bigger world. What the bees are needed to come in and fly in and help pollinate generate new thinking.
Yeah.
So I guess this is an episode on bees.
It is. So yeah. All I'm missing is the yellow stripes. I don't look good in yellow. It's not. I'm a winter. That's what. Anyway,
I'm very positive. I'm very excited. I'm very excited about the clients that are talking about this. I'm very excited to be involved in this, and it really is going to be a transformational state for organizations, the ones that take it, and then the other ones that I think we're going to have a massive organizations go out of business.
Oh, that would not surprise me, and I think when you're working with companies, the fact that you have board experience, it puts you ahead of a lot of other consultants who don't. I don't know a lot of consultants who have board experience. So that's a great niche for you.
Right. And I've always recommended for people, start off with a little local chapter trade nonprofit, get on the board, and you get a feel for that stuff. You're not going to get 50 years of experience in 3 years like I had, because you won't have an organization as toxic as this one that it was like hi, can I jump into a bath of acid and deal with it for long enough to have a positive impact on it? It's not just this organization. That entire industry is hurting because they've carried in these ideas that just don't function anymore. Yeah. And the whole industry is underslot, and businesses are going out of business, and it's consolidating, and the protectionism that they had of not being able to buy stuff, you had to buy it through one of their retailers, that's no longer there. You can buy stuff online, you buy direct from, and they don't have any, they've lost this power base that they had before.
Yeah. Well, and I think that fable goes along with or for any organization, and I think that's why so many are afraid of AI, because they're afraid it's going to put them out of business, or the ease of the internet of everything. It's not going to put them out of business if they can see things in a different way and look at different possibilities. So that's where the creative thinking, innovation, et cetera, comes in.
And that's what the consultant bees do. We bring in a different way of looking at things. We bring in different questions for them to ask. And that's one of the ways to guide and educate a board about the changes going ahead, so they can successfully navigate this radical shift that's going on.
Excellent. Yeah, there you go. Well, any other thoughts on that?
Probably a ton. We could probably go on for hours. I think we should just keep this short.
I think this is great for now. We will just be buzzing along as we buzz out of here. I'm Rona Lewis.
I'm Jeffrey Hansler.
That's our story. We're sticking to it. This has been Biz-Souls. See you later.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Biz-Souls podcast with your hosts Rona Lewis and Jeffrey Hansler. Did you have fun? Subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It's very much appreciated. Talk to you next week.